help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah Daf Lamed Dalid. We left off on Daf Lamed Dalid Amud Aleph. What we learned in the Mishnah, amongst many other things, on Daf Lamed Gimel, was that one is not allowed to make a tile white hot, which was a method that they used to roast or to cook items on top of the tile. You may not make the tile white hot on Yom Tiv, and we had on top of Lamed Daled two approaches to it. Either we're speaking about a brand new tile, and maybe when you'll make it white hot, that tile will crack, will break, and then it's going to come out that your exertion, that your efforts was not necessary because the tile broke. Right, and then we learned another option, another understanding, and that's that the tile that was brand new is actually not a finished product until it's heated up once. In other words, the first time that you would heat up the tile, that would be the real gemar malachtan. You would be finishing or completing the product. One may not complete something on Yom Tov. These are the two approaches. Now imagine that is going to lead us, first of all, to a more broader question of mi machzikinan ru'usa b'yam tov eloi. Do we have to be concerned, as we just explained, the first approach by the tile, that a problem will come up or not, how that will relate to other types of activities beyond the case of the tile? Maybe the case of the tile is relatively unique and remains limited. Maybe we'll apply to other scenarios. We're going to be learning more also about preparing food on Yom Tov using a brand new oven, see what issues might be with that. And on Daf Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph in the Mishnah, we're going to learn two leniencies of the Tana Rabbi Eliezer, which by the way is an anomaly, because Rabbi Eliezer, who's Shamuti, which also means that he generally follows the sheet of Beis Shammai, who's the Machmer, here he's lenient regarding the following. Now, Chevra, this topic will also go into Daf Lamed Hey, and it's going to go basically until the end of the Perek. When you have food that is semi-edible, the example that we continuously have, it was very common in the times of Chazal for people to take figs, for people to take grapes and other fruits, and they would put them out in the sun to dry. That's the way they would be preserved for much longer. When they're fresh, they're edible. When they're fully dried, they're edible. During the drying process, they are not edible. Food that's not edible is muktzah. But also, there are times that the food is nishtahen or nishtahin. It's semi-dried out. Some people would eat it. Some people wouldn't eat it. So it goes from being in the process of drying, not edible muktzah. It's a time thing. And then it starts to already become finished. It's very important to know how this produce was when Shabbos came in. Especially let's say we're going to follow Rabbi Yehuda, that if when Ben Hashmashas it was inedible, it's going to remain muktzah for the whole Shabbos. But what happens if you can't say it was inedible? It's up to the person. So Rabbi Eliezer says, number one, that a person's oral declaration is enough. If he says, I'm going to eat the produce the way it is, for me it's good, that declaration is enough to take away the muktzah status. And number two, if indeed this person is not going to eat everything that's on the roof that's being left to dry, because he would also want for some of it to dry out even better. He only wants to eat some of it. He does not have to specify what ones will he eat. He's able to say that from what's on the roof, I will eat some of it. So number one, the oral declaration means that whatever he'll take on Shabbos is already considered muchan, and we will apply the principle of Bereira, which means retroactive clarification, even though he did not specify which ones he'll eat. When he takes it on Shabbos, we'll say retroactively, these were the ones that he prepared to be eaten. These are two leniencies. The focus of the Gemara and Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis won't be about the Bereira, which we continuously learn about, won't be about the retroactive clarification, but it's going to be about this type of oral declaration. And we're going to learn a simple but basic rules of Trumais Umaisres. Produce that grows in the Holy Land. Let's begin with the 5 grains. let's add to it grapes and olives. According to most Rishonim, from there on, everything else is midrabanan, but we're not going to differentiate now. So whether it's produce, whether it's fruits and vegetables, for sure is midrabanan, but produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael has to be tithed from when? So here are those stages. Number one, it has to be a completed product. Nigmara malachton. Once it's nigmara malachton, but you're planning to take those products home, then really it has to come home. The words are Re'iyas Pnei Habayis. It has to see the face of your house. We're going to learn our sugya with Rashi that will include Re'iyas Pnei Chatzer as well. So if you have produce in the field, prior to it even being completed, you can eat from it. After it's Nigmar Malachton, before it's Re'iyas Pnei Habayis, or before it's Re'iyas Pnei Chatzer, before you bring it home, there, midrabanan, you can have a proper meal. You can no longer have achilas keva, but you can snack achilas aray. Even though the produce is ready and you didn't separate trumas from maasros, there wasn't re'iyas pnei bayis. Once there's re'iyas pnei bayis, then you may not even snack prior to tithing it. Now, there are certain things that can happen that will be in the place of re'iyas pnei habayis. The one that we will begin with is simply the day of Shabbos. Being that there's a mitzvah to enjoy eating food on Shabbos, Oynik Shabbos. That gives any snacking on Shabbos the same halachic weight of a permanent meal. So if you have nigmar malachton, even if there wasn't re'iyas pnei habayis, comes Shabbos Kodesh, for sure, you may not even snack from the produce before tithing it. No one debates that. What we will begin to analyze, what happens if there wasn't even nigmar malachton, but it's Shabbos, and you are deciding to eat it on Shabbos. Like, for example, the case of our Mishnah. You have produce that's being dried out. It's not fully dried yet. It's not nigmar malachton. You are deciding to eat it. Do we say that Shabbos is so strong that it gives chashivus even to items that are not nigmar malachton and no re'iyas pnei habayis, which means you may not even snack from it prior to tithing it or not? Or the koyach of Shabbos is only to take something from nigmar malachton and make it as if re'iyas pnei habayis. But if it wasn't even nigmar malachton, then Shabbos won't have the effect of asering, of prohibiting even taking a snack from the produce. And we'll see how this is mamish negeya to the topic of our Mishnah, which is about muktzah, regarding quasi-finished, semi-dried out produce. That's the whole daf. And Chevra, let's start. And more details, of course. Let us start on daf lamed daled, Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amud. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol na'im b'dvarim. So again, we learned about the prohibition of making a tile white hot in order to roast things on it. Roasting is allowed to be done on Yom Tov. You may not make the while white hot. First explanation was the top words of the Amud should sarich lebatkan, like Rashi says, might crack, and therefore if it cracks, toirach tircha shaloi l'tzoirach. So now the Gemara says, Tanan Hassan, we learned in Chulin regarding the laws of treifos, if the rasa of someone, of a person, stomped on top of a bird. Now this is the sugya of risuk evarim. Risuk evarim, right? You have a doctor here. Is that there's a certain type of inner displacements of inner organs, which happens when someone or something large falls on top of an animal, or if an animal is banged against the wall. Risuk raglayim could render the animal non-kosher. If the animal stands up, we're good. If the animal doesn't stand up, you have to wait 24 hours. And if the animal lives, then you can rule out the problem of risuk evarim. Now, so if the rasa of a person stomped on the animal, and it's about the weight of the person, so there the Mishnah is speaking about a bird. Smaller the animal, the more the concern that my weight, your weight, is going to completely shmeted the innards of the animal. If someone took the bird for whatever reason and they banged it against the wall, or if an animal crushed the bird, but It's not standing is a sign that it didn't get injured to the point that it's not kosher. On the other hand, didn't stand, but yes, it's still fluttering. That's a sign of life. So here, but the animal is not standing. Those were the details in Chulin. And you had the Shoasam Eis La'eis, and you already had the 24 hours, which rules out Risukei Varim. Now, if you shechted, it's kosher. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yanai, no. I have a tradition in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Antignois, even after 24 hours, so I know there's no Risukei Varim. Still, after you shech the animal, Tzricha Badika, you have to make an internal examination to make sure that the other of the 18 treifos, that the lung, that the heart, are not perforated. You have to look for other simani treifos. Now, truth be told, nowadays, when we shech the animal, there are certain things that we examine also. Like here in America, we examine the lungs. In other areas, you examine the lungs and the heart. But here, there's nothing that is making us think specifically that this animal has an injury. We just lechumra. We want to make sure that that there's no sirches, that you don't have scabs on the lung. Here, it's worse. Even though the animal it lived for 24 hours, nevertheless, the animal was injured. So here there is a larger concern, there's a graver concern that when something crushed the animal, some internal damage happened that will render the animal not kosher, you have to make a bedika. So now the question is, this animal that you're mechuyev to make an internal examination, can you shech this animal on Yom Tov? Gavaldik. After the 24 hours. Before the 24 hours, you're not allowed to shech the animal. Gavaldik. Why? Mamish like the tile. Because here there's a greater chance that the animal is a treif. If the animal is discovered to be treif, then we can say that it was a tircha shaloi l'tzoyrech. You shechted for no need. That's the words. Do we need to be concerned about a problem? Vis-a-vis, we're not allowed to make a unnecessary exertion. Right? This guy has a tile. The tile looks good. I always cook my egg on a white hot tile. The Mishnah says, no, you can't do it on Yom Tov. Why? Because maybe the tile is going to crack. Maybe it won't. The tile looks good. Yet, no, you can't do that. So, do we say the same thing by the Shechita? Oy loy, gevaldik, So says the Gemara, Amalei, Tanidim.
Are we talking about a new tile or just any regular?
So in both cases, it's a new tile. Once the tile was already used a few times, so you know that it's not going to crack, so then there's no problem. Okay. Amar lei tanina. We learned it in our Mishnah. Ein melabnim esaro ofim. You're not allowed to make very hot, white hot tiles. Litzlois bohen. And we asked, what's wrong? Vavinu b'maika avid. Right, the tile is already a finished product, and the first approach was, like we have at Mamish, the first words on the Amid, V'amar Abba Barachana, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that here, 1 second, that bit often Chadasha Maskin, and here you go, Yakir, clearly. In other words, it's dafke, if it was used already, then you know it's not going to crack. But since it's brand new, maybe it's going to crack. In other words, the possibility that it might crack does not allow us to use it. Now, I want to add a little nuance over here. And you can make noch a kal v'chomer. The case of our Mishnah, the tile right now is fine. It might crack when you make it white hot. In the case of the chulin, it's even worse. We know something happened to this bird. Someone crushed the bird. True, it's fluttering. True, 24 hours it didn't die, but it didn't stand. Here, if it's when you shecht and you make an internal examination, it wasn't that your shechita ruined it. It's like is a raya that retroactively it was never kosher. Even worse. So you have to be concerned about it. So Amar Lei, so l'chayrev proof from our Mishnah that yes, we have to be machzikinon, we have to be concerned for problems. So Amar Lei, no, I'm an optimist. We don't have to look for problems. And I reject that interpretation in the Mishnah. My understanding of the Mishnah is mipnei shetzarech lechasman. That's the second interpretation. that when you have a tile that was never yet made white hot after it was made into a tile, it's not yet a finished product. There are many products that they only become completed when they're used for the first time. I'm making a comparison, at least in Brazil, when you bought shoes, we were told, my mother says, never wear them the first time Shabbos and Yom Tov, because they would make blisters. You have to break them in. And these shoes, Americans don't know of these shoes. In other words, it's not even considered completed until you use it once. That's why the Mishnah says you're not allowed to use the tile, because it's not completed. But once it's completed, if the Torah says, like we learned above, that you wait 24 hours and it's fluttering and it didn't die, you don't have to be concerned for Risu Kevadim, even though you still have to make an internal examination. It's percentage-wise, there is a low chance that you're going to find a problem. And no, we don't have to be concerned about the problem. You can check that on Yom Tov. The tile is because you have to harden it. Chasma means to harden it. In the case of the bird, nothing needs to be hardened. Givaldik. It's like, how optimistic are we allowed to be halachically? And the answer is, we can be optimistic. Next, Tanya, we learned in the Beitzah more about heating tiles on Yom Tov. Echad mevi yasuur regarding cooking. If someone brings, I take that back. This is Shabbos now. Shabbos. If someone brings the fire, means he's carrying wood that's burning. And like Rashi will explain, when you walk with a fuel in the street, since you're walking, so there's more oxygen, there's more wind, it makes the fire bigger. Adding to the fire on Shabbos is an Isur Doiraisa. Wow. And someone else is bringing the wood. And then another person places the pot on top of the wood. The guy that added the wood, he added the wood in the fire. No, we're going to go through various people that are involved in the cooking, and everyone is being Machal Shabbos Midoiraisa. Now, placing the pot on the fire, if the pot is empty, what Chilul Shabbos is there? We'll see in a moment. That's the only unexplained. But again, carrying fire makes the flame bigger. Making the flame larger is included in the prohibition of mavir. The echad maybe is samayim, and someone puts the water in there, the pot on the fire, you put the water, that's called cooking. The echad noisim u'toichel tavlan, and another person putting the spices. The echad megis, and one person is steering. So when you take food and you steer it, you are moisev hevel. You complete the cooking process quicker, and that's also asur da'oraisa. It's good to know that. By the way, if those people learn a lot of Hilchas Shabbos, as we all should, there's a big machlokes. Do we say that steering a pot on the fire is cooking only before the food is ready? There's a few shittas. Either that's only if the food is not yet k'maychel ben drusoi. But we don't say that way. We say that even if the food is already edible, if it's not fully completed, you're violating doiraisa, speeding up the completion of the cooking. If the food is completely cooked, and then you're steering it, that's where I think there's only one sheet. I think the kolboy, that without a source, there's the kolboy that says,
it is the kolboy.
The kolboy, shkoyach, thank you. So that's all, whoever learned these sugyas, that's, where did he get it from? But this megis is the source, at least that if it's not fully ready, steering it is chayv chatos. Kulam chayav. Okay. Problem is, v'atanya we learned in the Beitzah.
Bringing the fire itself is not a problem?
Bring the fire is a problem, like Rashi said, because when you're carrying something that's already lit, moving it windy, the fire gets bigger.
Even if it's not, there's no wind, holding on to something.
Walking. Whenever you walk, you're making wind. What difference if you're putting the wind, you're walking? Walking versus stationary is more wind from the perspective of the coal. Obviously, right. We learned in another Beitzah that if all of these people were involved, only the last one is chayiv, everyone else is pater. Says the Gemara, the like kasha. Everyone is chayiv if the first step was the fire, and then again when you put aside of putting the pot, but when you put new wood on the fire, you're kindling. When you put water in the pot, everyone is doing something wrong. The last Beitzah that says only the last one is chayiv is that only the last one, if you put everything in there, you put the pot and you put the water and you put the spices, and then someone kindled the fire, so then the only achron is chayiv. Now, Bishleim Kolok of the Maisa, what's the connection here? We'll see in a moment. In the first Beitzah, everyone did something. Elo shoifes esakadei ma'ikavid, the one who put the pot on the fire, if the pot is empty, so what if the pot is getting hot? What did he do? Same thing. Now, we're speaking about a brand new pot. Just like we said, a brand new tile, the first time you heat it up, that is completing the utensil. That is, you finalized making it. Every pot is that way. That if the pot was never used, the first time you use something, you're completing it. Connected to our Mishnah again, just like we're not allowed to warm up a tile white hot. You can't make it very hot. Putting a pot on the fire is ki'ilu, you're being goymer the malacha, you're finalizing the product. No, it's God makes us. When are we finalized? When we do a mitzvah, bar mitzvah, because we were made for something. I think the first time something is being used for its kavanah, that's the gemar malach. Gewaldig. Now, Tanur, we learned in the Beitzah. Tanur.
The mindset's also to use a new keli for cooking on Yom Tov.
I don't know how halacha l'maisa, Avraham. I don't know. I don't know if we paskin that way, especially in good kalim. I don't know. There's a tie. I don't know.
Right.
1 second, Hassan. You know what, Avraham? Here he brings the ein mishpat ner mitzvah brings from the tile. Yeah, the din that a tile may not be used the first time is brought in Shulchan Aruch. I don't know if we say it by metal. I don't know if it goes to everything. Let's go weiter. Tanur Rabbanan. Tanur v'kirayim chadashim, if you have a brand new oven or a brand new double stove. And again, Shabbos. What beautiful is that kalim have multi-purposes. People used to store food in ovens, in these double ovens. Storage you're allowed to do. Therefore, says the Beitzah, Harei, Hen, Kachol, HaKelim, Hanitolim, Mechatzer, they are not muksa. These were typically used for storage as well. But avol ain't sochanesim shemen. You may not smear them with oil to make them shine. Ve'ain tashamoisim b'matlis. You may not rub them with the cloth to make them look shiny. Again, that's called you're finishing the product. You're finishing the making of the utensil. Ve'ain mafiganoisim b'tzoinon. You may not cool them down. When something is used also for the first time, so you make it hot and then you cool it down. Cooling it down is also. It's like making it ready. But there is only one time that you are allowed to cool something down. And on Yom Tiv, you know when that is, if you have an oven and it's burning hot and it's too high, you're going to put food in it right now. It's going to be overbaked. The outside will be baked, like when we bake yeshiva bachrim, and the inside is raw. You don't want that to happen. Then you are allowed to lower the fire, to cool it down. In other words, this is important, that any act that's considered direct cooking, you can even diminish the flame. Until today. So if you're going to put the bread in now, you're going to put the meat in now, that's the vart. But the temperature is 500 degrees. For this, you need to have 300 degrees. Since it's immediately before you're putting the food in, it's called direct food preparation. Direct food preparation is allowed to be done on Yom Tov, even if you're diminishing, if you are extinguishing or lowering the fire. Let's leave it at that. These are big sugis. Right. Tanur Rabbanan. In those days, they would eat the head of the animal, they would eat the legs, but when they would cook it, they would leave the hide on. And that's what. And after they cooked it, then they would remove the hide. So says the Beitzah that after they cooked it, now the first thing they would do is they would scald it with burning hot water. That was the way they would remove it after cooking the meat. You can do that, the head and the feet. Now you have to get rid of the hair. You can singe it with fire, but you may not remove the hair of the head and the feet. Again, they were cooked with their hides. You may not cover them with charoses, means lime. That will be the way normally you would remove the hair. Nor can you cover it with a certain type of earth or clay. Then they would rip it off to remove the hair. Nor use plaster to remove the hair. You may not use a scissor or to remove a hair, like Rashi says, because that's you're doing something which normally tanners would do, even though you're not doing it to tan, but it looks like a professional work. Similarly, if you have a vegetable and you want to cut off certain leaves that are not fresh from the outside, you may not use a utensil. Why is that? Why is that? Says Rashi, because it looks like, he says, when you're using utensils on a vegetable, it looks like you picked it today. We're learning all these types of gezedas. It's mechazeh kederech ha'abdanim. It's the chazi shelikton hayoin. Because normally you would take off the outer leaves that are not fresh the day that you picked it. Picking it on Yom Tov, we learned you're not allowed to do. Only milisha ve'elach. So don't do things that you would normally do on the day of the picking. However, if you are preparing the vegetables called the kundas and hu'ach biyois, are vegetables that demand a lot of effort to make them ready. We don't say, ooh, too much tircha. If the only way to get this vegetable ready is to do a lot of steps in the kitchen, you can do it. Another din, umasikin v'oifen bepurni, you are allowed to use a very large oven. Even though I'm baking a smaller amount of bread, and warming up a smaller oven is a lot easier than warming up a larger oven. If I'm doing something for food, I don't care if I'm doing a lot of work. It's directly connected to the food that I'm preparing. Chamen, you can warm up water. Ba'antichi in a very large keli. Even though you can argue you don't need all that, no, you can do that. However, this is the link. But one thing you may not do, you may not use an oven for the first time. Shemati faches, because it might crack. Again, these kalim, many of these kalim, this fear of cracking that's on top of the amish tzarich lebatkan, that it's again mechse, machzikin and the usa. Maybe it's a case by case. You have to know the keli, and if there's a higher chance that it's going to get ruined when you use it the first time, then you may not do it on Yom Tov. Weiter. Tanach Rabbanan. When it comes to Yom Tov, again, ein noivchen b'mapuach. You may not fan a fire with bellows. You can make the fire bigger. We learned in the Mishnah, you may not create fire on Yom Tov. D'oraisa, the Rabbanan, but you can make it bigger, but not in a professional way. Again, doing things that looks like you are a kamasa uman, that you are a artisan, Mexico, you may not do. The Mexico umen oisim alachem. I want you to know, guys, these are the hardest sugyas to apply halacha lamaisha. So say all of the achreinim. Okay, that's a good picture of bellows. Avol noivchim b'shoifredes, but you can blow the fire with a tube. Even though you're using a utensil, artisans didn't use that tube. They would use bellows. So if you're not doing kederech, the real pros, you are allowed to do it. Another thing, the ein misaknin es hashapud, you may not repair a spit. We learned that's machshirei erchel nefesh. You can use it even though it's not repaired. The ein mechaded den oisai, nor may you sharpen it. Again, that's the sugya, because you could have sharpened it before Yom Tov. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, that even machshirei erchel nefesh is doiche Yom Tov. If it only became unusable today, then you can fix it today. Tanach Rabbanan. Ein mefatzen es hakana. You may not crack open a reed. Litzleis loy moliach. Like we had in the Mishnah, there are certain foods, like salty fish, that if you put them directly on the grid or on the griddle, they're going to burn. You have to put something to separate them, so they would take a reed, they would soak it in water, and they would put it on the reed, something to be mafsik, so you may not crack the reed open. What you could do is, if you want to crack open walnuts, so today you have walnut crackers. What did you think they had then? So they put many walnuts in a zashmata, in a matlas, in a cloth, big bag, and they would start knocking it. So one would break open the other. That you can do. What's the issue? The issue is that you might tear the cloth. But no, we don't have to be concerned. Why? Why? Rashi explains, because even if it's going to tear open, you did not violate a biblical malach. Because the biblical prohibition of tearing, says Rashi, is only if you're doing it in order to sew it better. If it's not koireya almenas litvoid, it's only yasin midrabanan. So to make exeda, not to do something because you might violate a drabanan, that's generally something that we do not do. Okay, we'll stop over here. And now, I know we learned many dinim, and everyone we can spend a long time on, but at least from now on, basically until the end of the Pedic, we're going to be learning dinim of Trumas U'Maisris, but you'll see the link, how it comes into here, Hilchas Yantif. So, Nachamo. First of all, we had in the last Mishnah on Daf Lamed Gimel something unusual, that Rabbi Eliezer was lenient. If you remember, we learned yesterday that we have the Chachamim who have this chumrah, that wood, which was commonly fashioned into utensils in your house, So they made a takana. They were afraid you're gonna take wood. You're gonna make it into a handle on yontiv. So they said, wood can only be moved for fuel. Ein masikin. What's the words of Chazal? Sheloi nitnu eitzim elo lahasaka. Rabbi Eliezer, normally he's the machmer. He was lenient. That's how we had the Mishnah. We learned two leniencies. What we last Mishnah had, and you can take wood from the chutzid, it doesn't have to be in the house. Those were the two leniencies. So now the Mishnah, that's the va'oid. So I'll find for you another unusual scenario where Rabbi Eliezer is the one that's lenient. What's the case? We spoke it out in the introduction. Again, food that is edible is never going to be muktzah. Food that's inedible when Yontiv or Shabbos comes in is muktzah. When they would dry out figs or grapes or any other product that was commonly dried out, when it's fresh, edible, no problem. When it's dried out, edible. If it's in the process of drying out, at times it's completely inedible. And even if you eat it, it's inedible. If Shabbos came in at that state, it's muktzah for the whole Shabbos. If we're going to follow Rabbi Yehuda, kiven the iskatzoi. But there are times that it's in between. Some people eat it, some people don't. Then it depends on the kavana of the owner. Is it kavana or is it an action? Does he have to handle it or does he have to say? Is an oral declaration enough? Number one. Number two, what happens if I'm the owner? I know it's not that good. I'm not going to eat all of it up. I just want to have enough for dessert. So I'm going to use 10% on what's my roof. So do you have to specify which 10% I will have on Shabbos? Or Rabbi Eliezer is lenient and he says, as long as you make only an oral declaration that from what is on my roof I will eat some, you're good. Let's read it inside. For Oid, more, another case where he's lenient. For Oid, Rabbi Eliezer, Oimed Adam ala Muktzah. Guys, don't get confused. Here, just to know, here, Muktzah means fruits that are being dried out. Muktzah means that while you're drying it out, no one touches it. It's inedible, you're going to ruin it. That's the meaning of muktzah here. So if it's already half ready, some people will eat it the way it is. But if you don't make a designation, it's going to be muktzah. Says Rabbi Eliezer, you stand by the muktzah, and now kederach of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, she's going to throw a ball from the left field, and he's going to make things a lot more spicy. So he gives another detail, and we'll see why that's important. Guys, like this, on Shemitah, being that all of the produce, even though everyone can pick a little bit from themselves, from anywhere to eat, until the Zman HaBiyur, but there is no obligation to separate Trumos U'Maisros on Shemitah year. So that's important. What the Rebbe wants to say in the Mishnah is that when you have produce, right, if I grow something to dry it out, normally I would never separate Trumos U'Maisros before it's ready. If I'm making a declaration before Shabbos, I'm going to eat some of my almost ready dried out grapes, raisins on Shabbos, hold on, aside of muktzah, what about it's not tithed? So to avoid that problem, Rebbe gives an example. It happened Erev Shabbos on the Shemitah year. Point is that the only issue is muktzah, no issue of you didn't tithe it yet. And Rashi adds a detail. Rashi says there were people that would already separate Trumos U'Maisros before they would dry it. Oichet can also be. So it doesn't have to be on Shemitah year. All Rebbe wants to say is that the only problem is that, again, when the fruit is in middle of being dried out, normally it's muktzad, it's set aside from being eaten. You can't eat it when it's drying out. So now if you want to eat it on Shabbos, muktzah, so you have to make it muchan. But once you make it muchan, if also it would not be tithed, you anyways can't eat it. So that's why he avoids it. It happened to be out of Shabbos on the Shemitah year. And va'omer, only an oral declaration is enough to say, leniency number one is, you don't have to handle it. An oral declaration is enough to remove its muktzah status. Leniency number two is, you don't have to specify from what you're going to take, because Rabbi Eliezer subscribes to the rule of breid of retroactive clarification. However, the Chachamim disagree with both. Number one, an oral declaration is not enough. Most people don't eat it when it's in this state. You have to make a reshima. You have to mark. No, it's not only to handle. Remember we had that before by the birds. We had other cases where you go into the nest, right? You have to specify the oral, similar. First of all, you have to make a mark. You have to make some physical mark on the produce. And number two, they don't subscribe to Bereda. So therefore, if you are not planning to eat all of it, some of it, you have to make a reshima on the ones you're going to take. V'yoymen mikan va'atkan. Now, I don't know if it means you have to make a reshima on every single one. I'm saying that because then why would you have to say mikan va'atkan if you made a little mark on each one? Because you have to do something and you have to then specify the area. Now, the fact that the Rebbe threw in this curveball of, it must be, yes.
What happens if you don't eat it all? So according to Rabbi Eliezer, designate this whole pile, as it, I want to have the ability to eat it. And then you eat only some. So what?
No problem. I don't understand your question.
I think the Chachamim is saying you have to specifically...
The Chachamim are saying is that if you did not specify which ones you are making muchan, you cannot decide on Shabbos which ones are muchan for you. Since many people don't eat it when it's in middle of it being dried out, even though it's already edible, it's still called muktzah. You have to make it...
As long as you said, I'm muchaning this whole thing, then it's fine.
And more, even more, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, even if I know I'm not going to have the whole thing, and I know that some of the produce I dafka want, it should be dried out more. And I'm saying...
Why is needed? You can just say, I want to have the whole thing.
Because you're saying the same thing because you don't want the whole thing. You want it to be dried out 100%. It's only dried out 80%. But for Shabbos, you want to have something. I'm saying, if I'm not going to eat up the whole thing, I rather it be dried out, but I will be taking a little bit of it on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Even then, it's good. If you said what you said, Yakir Avada, if a person says, I'm going to eat it all, and then you decide not to eat it, avad, it's good. Even if you're saying, I don't consider it fully ready. Some of it I'm going to leave out, but some of it for Shabbos is ready for me. That's okay. Okay, the Nakuda again, we spoke this out in the just to repeat. Number one, untithed produce, before it's even finished, completed, you can even have a meal from it. Once it hits the stage of Nigmar HaMalachton, guys, remember these words. Once it's Nigmar HaMalachton, it's completed, then Midrabanan, you cannot have, but you didn't bring it home yet. You did not bring it home yet, produce that you're going to bring home. Then you can't have Achilas Keva, you can still snack. Once it's Nigmar HaMalachton and Re'iyas Penei HaBayis, or Re'iyas Penei HaChatzer, you brought it into its final place, now you may not, midrabanan, but you may not even take a snack. That's clear. Another clear thing, once produce is Nigmar HaMalachton, but there wasn't Re'iyas Penei HaBayis, but Shabbos Kodesh comes, since Achila on Shabbos is a mitzvah, so on Shabbos, what you call a snack is called Keva. Nigmar HaMalachton and Shabbos, you may not even snack without tithing. No one debates that. The one question that will begin here, we're going to have Rav Nachman today, God willing, we're going to have Rabbi Yochanan who argues on Daf Lamed Hey, will be what happens if it's not even Nigmar HaMalachton. You'll see the link to the Mishnah already, because you have this produce that's not Nigmar HaMalachton, but Shabbos comes. Are we going to say that if you won't tithe it, you can't have it even at Arai? We're just going to try to say why Rebbe said Shemitah. Why did we have to bring Shemitah? Why are you having a snack? So again, and we'll get, that's the question. Let's read it inside. Tanan also we learned in the Mishnah. And again, we have so much throughout the Mishnah is this scenario of designating fruits that many people leave to dry, even fresh figs. If you normally dry your figs until you decided to eat it fresh, it's not even Nigmar HaMalachton. It's not even Nigmar HaMalach because it's not ready yet. But once you decide to eat it fresh, now it's Nigmar HaMalachton, which would mean that you cannot have a meal. You can't have Achilas Keva. Now, who determines whether you're going to eat it fresh or whether you're going to put it out to dry? The Mishnah says that even a child, if a child takes a fresh fruit and they decide, I'm eating it the way it is, or the case the Mishnah gives is so cute because we did this as kids. We hide candy for Shabbos. I did that as a kid. So the candy nebach was fruits for them. So if kids went into the kitchen and they took some fresh fruits, And they knew that Tati and Mami, they're going to put it to dry. But they took it and they hid it to eat it on Shabbos. Since they, even a child, if they are planning to eat it as is, that's called Nigmar Malachtan. Let's read it. If they hid figs to eat on Shabbos, and there was not tithed. So what's the word? Number one, guys, the designation of even a child to eat it as is means Nigmar Malachtan. Number two, even if he hid it in the field, no the Iyas Penei Abayis, Nigmar Malachtan and Shabbos Kodesh, the day of Shabbos, is machshiv that you can no longer eat it without tithing it, not even as a snack. Now the question is, do you say that only on Shabbos? Or now that Shabbos came, even after Shabbos leaves, you still cannot snack of it. Says the Mishnah, even L'Motzoi Shabbos, you cannot even snack Elam Kein Isroi. But it's not just that since eating on Shabbos is V'karas Lo Shabbos Oinig, so we say that even Aray is like Kava. Once Shabbos comes, it activates the chiyuv of tithing it to the point that you cannot even snack from it, even L'Motzoi Shabbos. Gewaldig. Guys, we learned a lot of details here. So we learned about Gemar Malacha is sometimes determined by your intent. Shabbos not only is machayiv to ma'aser, even after Shabbos, you still cannot even snack from it. Another din. If you spread out some figs on your field to dry out, so here the din is that your family members can eat from it. Arai, upeturin means that they don't have to tithe it to eat a snack. Why? Even though it's finished, even though it's dried out, because there's no Iyas Penei Habayis. Okay, that's the din, that when something is Nigmar Malachton, if it did not yet come into the bias, no Shabbos, there are other details. We'll learn other things that we just learned in the Rambam, 6 activators. One is Shabbos, then Arai you can have. This is the one question. Shabbos mahu shetikba muktzah. Guys, muktzah here doesn't mean muktzah for Shabbos. Muktzah means it's not fully ready. Muktzah is the case of our Mishnah. It's semi-dry. Shabbos mahu shetikba muktzah l'maisir. And I know that the word muktzah and shaloi nigmar malachta is the same. It's almost superfluous that the Rishonim speak about it. That's the question. It's not even Nigmar Malachton. Some people eat from it, but some people don't. But it's not Nigmar Malachton for everyone. And now with Shabbos, I don't need the Iyas Penei Habayis, but do I at least need Nigmar Malachton? So the day of Shabbos Kodesh itself is Kavah. Kavah means it establishes the obligation. To what level? Like we learned above in the second Mishnah here. Not only may you not snack on Shabbos, once it's Shabbos, now you're mechuyev, even the Motzoi Shabbos, you may not even snack from it. Because Shabbos, or maybe this concept that Shabbos is koiveya, only if at least there was nigmar malachton. The chiddush is there was no Iyas Penei Habayis. Only then kiva'ah. Even though it didn't go into your house, even though it was not brought into your yard, it's just out there in the field. But maybe loy kiva'ah. That was the question Rava asks of Rav Nachman. Question answer. Rav Nachman holds Amalei Shabbos koiva'as bein bedavar shenigmar malachtoi bein bedavar shenigmar malachtoi. Azoy sagt Rav Nachman, and we're going to try to find a source for Rav Nachman, and you'll see how it's going to be linked to our Mishnah. Amalei says Rav to Rav Nachman. How do you know? The Ema Shabbos is like the Chatzir. It's also like Shabbos is like Iyas Penei Habayis. It means here the same thing, according to Rashi. Maybe just like Chatzir only establishes the obligation. If something is not even completed and you bring it into the house, then on a biblical level you'll never be chayiv to tithe it. People that were trying to do a ha'arama, that they were looking for a way out, not to tithe it, that's exactly what they would do. They would bring it into the house through a skylight. Many Mishnayos and about that. So maybe you have to have step 1, step number 2. Without step number 1, never gets activated. Af Shabbos, maybe, how do you know that? So Amalei, so Rav Nachman responds, I have such a Mesoidim. Amalei, it's called Limud Aruch Hu Biyodenu. There's a teaching, very clear, my Rabbeim taught me that. That what? Shabbos koivas bein bedavar shenigma malachtoi bein bedavar sheloi nigma malachtoi. I have an oral tradition. Was Rav Nachman himself did not have a source in the Tanoim. Azoi unazoi is the inyan. So now the Gemara is going to try to find a source for him. And you know what? We're going to succeed. We're going to go back and forth, but we're not going to finish this today. So let's begin. So now we're looking to see if in the works of the Tanoim we can bring a source to this rule of the koyach of Shabbos. That it's koivas, it establishes an obligation. And now you cannot even snack from it. Omar Mazut Rav Nachman, you don't have a Mishnah? I have a Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, again, the word muksa here means if you have fruits that are in middle of drying out, while they're drying out, no one touches them. That's called they're set aside. They were dried, by the way, on the roof, not in the field, because they didn't want anyone to touch them. Away, out of sight, out of mind. So if someone can stand on muksa on Erev Shabbos, bashvi is. Now, a very simple thing. Until the produce is fully dried, it's not nigmar malachton. If it's not nigmar malachton, even Shabbos is not koivas, the way Rava was saying, maybe, why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh have to mention Shemitah here? So it says, Agavaldik, right? It should be great. So it says, Marzutra, Taima the Shviz. That's why the only issue in our Mishnah was muktzah, and Rabbi Eliezer's chiddush, oral declaration is enough. Bereira could be used. The lav bal isuruhu habishar shnei shavua, but in any other years of the 7-year cycle, then to get a figure, even if you make an oral declaration, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. Why not? Because ha'achinami the asur. Why? Why asur? Because you didn't tithe it yet. But who cares? It's not nigmar malachtan. Lav mishum, that Shabbos is kova'ah. Gavaldik. It's our Mishnah speaking about produce that's not nigmar malachtan. Great. That should be a great raya. So says the Gemara, I'm sorry, our Mishnah doesn't prove. Loy. I will argue, Shani Hasam. Hasam means here, our Mishnah here in Beitzah is different. Because Kivin the Omar Mikan ani Oichel Lemachar. This is not produce that is Shaloi Nigmar Malachton. It depends for whom. It depends for whom. The fact that someone is declaring that I am going to eat from this tomorrow, this declaration makes it a final product. This declaration makes you obligated to tithe it. The declaration makes you machayev. Oh, it's not even Shabbos, has nothing to do with Shabbos. The question was whether Shabbos is koiva'as, even shaloi nigmar malachton. Here, maybe it's because you said you're going to eat from it. That's why kavalei ilavi. Beautiful. So the Gemara says, no. Push back, but we're going to stand with this. Ihachi, ma'yir Shabbos, if it's not about Shabbos, then afilu b'choil nami, then even during the week, an oral declaration should bring about the chiyuv of being ma'asidit, right? Right. Look inside Rashi, guys. The first widest line under Tosfos, the widest in middle. Ma'yir Shabbos, says Rashi, ma'yir da ashma'inan hach b'Shabbos. Why did Rebbe give a case of Erev Shabbos? Lashme'inan b'choil. He should have taught this halacha. This halacha of what? That your declaration that you are going to eat it, even though it's not fully dried, that makes gemar malacha. He should have taught it in Zerayim. Now, but people are going to say, what are you talking about? Our Mishnah is not focusing on that. Our Mishnah is focusing on the question of muksa, not muksa. Fine, says Rashi, explaining the Gemara. The question of muksa or not, we learned on Daf Yud. Don't mix two things together. You want to know, what did we learn? You have pigeons. Remember that whole sugya? And you have to make a declaration that these pigeons are going to be shechted on Yom Tov. And if you don't make that declaration, then it's not called muchan. And then we have a machlokes or b'shamei b'silo. Do you have to handle it? Or oral declaration? No, you're mixing two topics. If all you want to tell you, if the oral declaration makes gemar malacha, teach that din in Masechta Zerayim, in Seder Zerayim. An oral declaration is gemar malacha. You want to teach a din of muksa? Then teach a din of muksa. Don't even mention the case of semi-dried out fruits. You're confusing two things. Teach it b'negei pigeons. That if there's something that you declare, do you have to declare? Do you have to make a roshim? Bereira, no bereira? So the fact that the Rebbe brings it over here, that's because we're learning Hilchas Yom Tov and Shabbos, is yes to teach you that Shabbos is koiva'as. It's not about your oral declaration. Let's read back inside the Gemara. So the Gemara says, the final rejection, no. The reason why Rebbe needs to teach it in the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov is to tell you another side in. Really, Chavre, halk up. Shabbos from our Mishnah is not koiva'as the chiyuv of trumas u'maisres if it's shaloi nigmar malachtim. The machayev, maybe, is your oral declaration. Why did he not speak about this in Zerayim? Just leave things separate and it gets everything complicated, because I have another final question, and that is that the tevel muchanu eitzel Shabbos, if something was not tithe before Shabbos, tevel. We know, Chevra, that midrabanan, not midoiraisa, midrabanan, you may not separate trumas u'maisres, not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov. You should have done it before, and that's called rabbinic tikkun mana. Okay, now let me ask you a question. If someone violated this rabbinic rule, God forbid, and they separated trumas u'maisres on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, is this produce muktzah? Why should it be muktzah? Because since midrabanan you may not tithe it, you didn't tithe it yet, so you knew you're not going to eat it. It was set aside from being used. One could have argued that. Rebbe wants to tell you we don't say that. We don't say that. What we say is that if someone violated the rabbinic and they separated trumas u'maisres wrongfully, but now that they separated it, you can't say that this food is not muchan. It's muchan. The only problem is that it's not tithed. If you resolve the tithing, then you can eat it. The tevel muchan etzel Shabbos, meaning she'im avar v'tiknoi mesukah. Now, how do you know this from our Mishnah? Why does that justify Rebbe bring it in our Mishnah? Let's look inside the Rashi again. 3 lines in the wider lines, in the beginning of the line, under the Tosfos. Lahachi naked gabe Shabbos. What activates the chiyuv is not Shabbos. Maybe. No proof. What activates the chiyuv is your oral declaration. Why did he bring it over here? Since we're speaking, our topic is achana. Our topic is that if this food is semi-dry, it's not muchan. The bishar shnei shavua, that in other years, not shmita, einoi asur mishehezminam ela mishum meiser bolvad. That during the other years, if you designated this food to be eaten, the only reason why you cannot eat is because you're not allowed to tithe it. Because you're not, and you can't tithe. But other than that, but if the only problem is, if the only ma'akev is halachically I can't tithe it, but the produce is ready, then if someone tithed it, I can eat it. She'im ba'adam echad v'avar and v'tiknoi mesukin u'motor la'echol. And v'lo yomrinon lo mahanya lehazmana kozman shelei niskan, because it's muktzah machmas isur. Toha muktzah machmas isur tevelhu, and since it's tevel va'aschei date komash malon kiven the hagbas truma meiser midoiraisa shari. You are allowed to tithe it on Shabbos midoiraisa. It's only on midrabanan ein ze muktzah machmas isur. Gewaldig. No, he dafke brought the din here in Beitzah, which is discussing Muktzah, Shabbos, and Yom Tov, to tell you that the only issue over here is how to make this fruit be considered nigmar malachtan. I am deciding to eat it. The tithing issue is only a gavra, not a chefza. So Rebbe says, in order for us to resolve the tithing issue, it's on the year of Shemitah. Remove that. Bottom line is, the Nikud is like this, that in our Mishnah, it could be that the very fact that you made an oral declaration, which is enough according to Rabbi Eliezer, that you will eat some of it on Shabbos and on Yom Tiv, that makes Gemar Malacha, which is why now you're chayived, which that makes it, and since there's no tithing issue because it's on Shemitah, or in the weekday if someone violated, there's no tithe, if they already violated, then you can eat of it. But you don't know from our Mishnah that if something is taken not nigmar malachton, you don't know that Shabbos has such a koyach that Shabbos is koiveya de chiyuv. That you don't know from our Mishnah. But Rav Nachman understands. Rav Nachman has a limud aruch that the power of Shabbos isn't only to replace, to be equal to the iyas panei habayis. The koyach of Shabbos is even if it's not nigmar malachton. The fact that it's Shabbos Kodesh, now obviously we can't be speaking about something that's completely raw. We're speaking about something that's quasi-ready. You want to snack from it. You cannot even snack from it. You cannot even snack from it, not only on Shabbos. You can't even snack from it for Motzoi Shabbos. Because once the kiviyus, the obligation of tithing, was enacted, then midrabanan, you may not even take a snack from it. And God willing, we'll continue to look for a source for the din of Rav Nachman, and we'll see on Daf Lamed Hey that Rabbi Yechanan actually argues with him. A lot more to be continued.